everyone, welcome back to Coding from Null. This is week 4 where we're building our own React-based coming soon page. In the last couple of videos, we've focused on class components. This week, it's going to be a pretty short video because we're really just going to be building two functional components to house our title and the description. And I figured this would be a good time to kind of delve into the differences between class components and what we'll call stateless functional components. So we'll be digging into that, and then a little bit of CSS grid to make some styles as we've done in the last few videos. So let's start digging in.
All right, so here we are where we left off last week. We got our nice spinning gear. We got to start putting into our application our title and our description. And these are both going to be just stateless functional components. And so what we've been dealing with mostly up to this point is class components. And I'll show you, so we'll bring up, our coming soon here. And so this is a JavaScript class that's extending from React component. And what this gives us is it gives us state, which gives us the ability to hold some sort of data about our component or our application. And it also gives us, like in the case of our countdown component, it gives us access to what we call lifecycle methods, which are the component did mount, component will unmount. There's a whole host of other ones. Basically, the lifecycle of the component when it mounts to the page, when it unmounts to the page, so on and so forth. Now, what's different about stateless functional components is, as the name suggests, we don't have access to state and we don't have access to these lifecycle methods. Now, that's not entirely true. We're going to leave it just kind of there for the purposes of this video. There, in the latest versions of React, there's these things called hooks, which actually allow you to take a functional component, like our logo is just a functional component. It's basically just a JavaScript function that's returning some JSX. And it allows you to hook in to those additional things that you get with a class component. So we're actually able to use state, and we have access to something called use effect, which kind of gives us access to the lifecycle methods, though not really how we're used to seeing them, not like the component did mount. And it's not that granular, we'll say that. But we will get into that in more detail in a later video. We'll actually take our class components that we have in our application and we'll actually convert them over using hooks to functional components. But that's another video. But that's basically the difference between class components and the functional components that we are going to use to put our title and our description into our application. So without further ado, let's start actually doing that. So in our components, let's actually flip back over to the one we're working on here. So in our components, we want to add a couple of new files. We want to add one that's title.js, and we'll go ahead and we'll add another one called description.js. And we'll start with the title. And so for the title, we're going to, as with all of our components, we're going to import React from React. And then we will export const title equals, and then there's a prop that we're going to want to pass into this component, and that is going to be the text, so that we can choose whatever the text is that we have displaying for that title. So we'll pass that in as a prop, and There we go. And then we'll just simply return a h1 tag, and we'll actually give that a class name of title. For when we do some CSS, you can select it by the title, and we'll say text for our prop. Now let's go ahead and actually we'll do the same for the description, get this one cooking along as well. So for the description, again, we're going to import React from React, and we will export const description, and this will equal, we're going to do a very similar thing here. We're going to be passing in some text for that as well. And then our arrow function and return our JSX. And our JSX is going to be a little bit different. We're going to have a div tag, and the class name is going to be description. And then inside of that, we will have a paragraph tag, which will take that prop of text, and we will call this, we'll have a class name on this as well, and this will be just description text. Now, the reason that we're doing this a little bit different, instead of just having just a paragraph tag like we had here, just an h1 tag, we are actually later on down the road, we're going to add another component in here, and so we need something to wrap both of them. So that's why we have this div here. Because remember, if you remember from an earlier video when we were showing the whole application, I'll just show kind of what I'm talking about here. If we go test@test.com and we submit that, we have this notification that actually pops up over this. And this component is going to be wrapped in here as well. So we just need kind of this parent JSX element to wrap both the paragraph and that other notification I will add in later. So now let's go ahead and go into our styles, and we'll add our style sheets for both of these. So we'll say title.css, and we will also add a description.css. And while we're at that, let's go ahead and just import those directly in here. So we will say import and /styles/title.css, and in the description, import /styles/description.css. Go ahead and give that a save. And so now what we want to do is add these components to our highest order one, which is our coming soon component. And we want to pass down those props for the text values. So first here, let's go ahead and import both of those components up here. And so we will import title. This will be from /title, and we will also import description from /description. And we want to store in state what we are going to pass down for the text values. So for the title, we're just going to have the text equal to coming soon. And then we will have our description, and this text will be this guy here. Oops, got too many quotes going on. Why is it? There we go. And so this is just the standard text that I have for that the course platform will be up and running shortly, and then my little call to action to have them fill out for the newsletter below. And so remember that we want to destructure our state here so that we don't have to type this dot countdown, this dot logo for everything. And so we will say title and then description here. And then let's go ahead and add our two components. So we have our title and our description. All right, and now we want to pass in those props. So we'll say text equal to title.text. And then same for description. We've got text is equal to description.text. So we've passed our props in there. So now if we go ahead and give this a save, we should see our text coming up here, which is exactly what we want. Now you'll notice we want to add some CSS here. Obviously, this isn't as styled as we'd like. And there's also something going on here is that we need to take into account is that we kind of want to shorten this up a bit, because the way it's going to go right now, if I keep stretching this out, it's just going to continue on to one big long sentence, which doesn't really look quite that nice. We want to kind of have this have sort of like a container that it, or a max width that it will go to, and we will cover that here in just a second. So let's go ahead and start styling this. So let's switch on over to our title.css, and we are going to go ahead and grab the title and start with that. Now we want to have this in the grid area of title, which it kind of already is just because of the layout that we have, but I always like to explicitly say that. Then we're going to display grid on this, and we're going to give it some grid gap. Set this at 20 pixels, and we will give it a width of 100% and a max width of 700 pixels. Now we're not going to notice any difference for this one just quite yet, but what we're doing here is, so if it's below 700 pixels, it will just be the 100% and it'll just fill the window. And if it's over that, the max width is going to be 700 pixels. Now, for this one, what it's going to allow us to do is make sure that this doesn't extend past here either. So for one, we don't have our description going out all the way, and we don't want this to be extending out all the way either. We want it kind of contained here within that 700 pixels that we're setting right here. Now let's go ahead and set a grid template column. And so this is actually going to be 3 columns, because we have this little guy here, the text, and then this one here. So we are going to say this is 1 FR, so it's just going to fill this side, which will give us this nice, as we get smaller and smaller, see how it shrinks. So it's just kind of taking up whatever extra room is here, and then we'll auto the text. So the text will always be the same, and then whatever's left over, it'll kind of give to these guys here. So we'll go 1FR, auto, 1FR. And what we are going to use is the before and after pseudo elements to get this going on here. And what the pseudo elements allow us to do, it allows us to add something either before or after an element. So if we wanted to do like some underlining or stuff, we could do an after, display below, or a before would typically display above. But because we've set this as display grid and we've marked out the columns as 3, it's actually going to line them up one right after each other exactly the way we want. So we'll say .title, and then we'll select the before pseudo element. And then we also want the title after pseudo element as well. Now for these, we're just going to say display block. And whenever you're working with before and after, it always is going to look for a content. And since we are not putting any text in there, we're just going to say it's an empty string. And then we'll go ahead and set a height for this at 10 pixels. Okay. Give that a save. Don't really see anything going on here yet because we haven't really gotten any color going on here. And so what we want to do now is grab these both by each other. So we will say .title before. And how I want this to look is it's going to be a linear gradient that we're going to use to get that cool effect that we see. So we'll say linear gradient. And then this one, since it's the before, it's going to go to the left. It's going to go to the left here, and then on the other one we're going to go to the right and then have it a gradient from this color green that we're using down to transparent. So we'll say to left, and we'll use that CSS variable that we have set up, which is our green that we're using, and then have it go to transparent. We'll go ahead and give that a save. And so now we're seeing that we have the one on the left here, which is perfect. It's exactly what we want. And now we can just go ahead and copy this, come down here, give it a paste. We'll do this as after, and the gradient is going to go to the right. All right, so we're looking pretty good there. The last thing that we need to do is just align everything in here correctly. So we'll come up here to our title, and we will just say align content center. Give that a save. It's not align content. Gotta align the items. Give that a save. And there we go. Now everything is lining up exactly the way we want. Now, real quick here, while I'd like to take credit for this very cool sort of trick here that we're using, this is definitely not something that I came up with. I'm not a designer well enough to come up with something like that. So whenever I'm using something from someone else, I definitely always like to put some sort of credit in there. And this is actually from a course, a CSS grid course. So if you really want to learn in-depth CSS grid, I definitely highly recommend this one by Wes Boss at cssgrid.io. And in that, he uses this to get this little effect. And you also learn like a bunch of other cool stuff, like how to do a full bleed blog, and then like a totally responsive website and stuff like that. But it's definitely a very good course. I would definitely highly recommend it. But that is it for our title. So now we can go ahead and start adding the CSS for our description. And as with the title, we want to explicitly call out the grid area, which is going to be description. And if you don't remember, I should probably bring this up from time to time. So when we're doing these grid areas and we're grabbing these are actually from the first video in this series. We set these at, I want to say here. Yeah. So we set these grid template areas as countdown, logo, title, description, subscribe, and social. And we gave all those rows, specific heights here. And so that's all we're doing here. We're just saying, hey, put this element in this description grid area. And this one is actually going to be this auto. So it's just going to auto, the height is going to be whatever is in that description. So we have our grid area. We're also going to display grid on this one as well. We're going to set a font size of 16 pixels. We're going to give it a font weight of 500, which will give us a nice little bolding. And then the same thing that we want to do here, we want to set the max width at 700 pixels. And then we are just going to give it one column, grid template columns, one FR. Now if we go ahead and give this a save, should be sitting pretty good here. One thing that I want to do is I want to explicitly say that I want the description text to stretch from one side all the way to the other. And the reason why I want to do that is because remember, we are going to be sliding over on top of this that notification. And so we want to make sure that that's explicitly stated so that this guy doesn't move around at all. Now, let's actually go ahead and bring up our Firefox Developer Edition so we can kind of see a bit better the row numbers for everything there. So localhost 3000, Control-Shift-I brings up your developer tools. We'll come down here to description, flip that on, and if you want, actually put the background and somewhere here, display line numbers. I'll take this background off. Okay, so we want it to stretch from 1 to the very last one. The very last, either row or column, is always -1. And the first one is always 1. So when you want it to stretch all the way across, even if this was 2, this would be 1. Say we have 2 here. This would be line 3. This would be -1. All the way to the right is always -1, and all the way to the bottom is always -1. So we will say we want to grab our description text, and this is going to be grid column, and we want it to go from 1 to -1, and grid row as well from 1 to -1. Now we're not going to see much change here when we save because it's already kind of filling that out, but when we start to do our notifications and stuff, that's going to help us out a lot. Let's go ahead and close that. And with that, that is going to finish us up for this week. Next week, we will start digging into the actual subscription part where someone can sign up for our newsletter. That's going to be definitely at least 2 videos, maybe even 3. As we dig through that, it starts to get a little complex. But I hope you're looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. And remember to go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all next week.